out, but this is not really necessary. So we can read it, but it's up to you. So
Oh, screen mode.
well, the slides are perfectly readable, and
Okay,
just
I'll
just use
start the
them as they
slides.
are. Then there's no need to worry. So sometimes you hit some button and then something strange appears, and if everything is bad, then suddenly all slides disappearing, and this is what we don't want to risk. So don't worry, that's fine. And
I'm not sure that,
they are perfectly readable.
but you say, wait a bit, I cannot operate it.
8 already. And so the next speaker is Professor Anatol Slissenko.
Mhm.
He is in Paris right now, and he's working in computer science. And he's speaking about the interesting title, What is There Exists? Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that my talk is not scientific, so you can relax. To start with, I say a couple of words about Vladimir Orevkov, so a couple of historical remarks. Now he's a doyen of logicians in St. Petersburg, Leningrad, and I know him for at least 60 years. He was in the group of mathematical logic from of Stiklov Mathematical Institute here, starting from 1962. The group was created a year before, and I joined it after him. It was a great pleasure to be in the same research group with him for many, many years, to participate in the same seminars, and to program the same algorithm of automatic proof search in propositional logic. That was not bad for that time, maybe very good. So we were also programmers. Now, yeah. So he knows a lot about what is there exist, and I will mention a couple of his results in this context.
You think we could see we could see your face? In other words, I just see you have to
My face.
click on a button or if your camera works.
Start video.
Ah,
You see.
wonderful.
Okay. You see also Swiss Alps, but I'm in St. Petersburg. Okay, so the question of understanding the existence has a long history in philosophy. I don't know the history, I just know its existence. A couple of examples. Si falar sum, si je me trompe, je suis, it's French. If I know that I'm wrong, I am. It's a reference on very respected Roman African Manichaean early Christian theologians. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. It's Descartes. It's that treatment of thinking. I will try to distinguish three there exists and there does not exist, though the frontiers between them are vague. Theoretical, there exist, imaginary, or mythical, there exist, and here is one very important particular thing. It's there exist for believers in some object, which is for some people is imaginary, but for the others is in some way real, though not visible. And physical, there exists. Look at the following two theorems that use there exists. I said two results of Orevkov to show that his interests were rather wide. The class of formulas, there exists x, y, d1 and d2, where these are simple disjunction, is a reduction class for classical predicate calculus with functional symbols. Here, there is one, there exists, is quite a logical symbol. There is another, there exists, it's reduction. And there is one does not exist because classical predicate calculus is not decidable. Another, there exists of different nature. There exists a constructive mapping of a closed disk to itself without constructive fixed point. So how different there exists are related to real, better to say, physical life. The first there exists is just a symbol with rules of admissible manipulations. The rules describe how to reason correctly about existence. It is our theory based on some practice, but theory. Two other there exist, describe algorithms. Though the algorithm here are texts, but they can be implemented and thus refer to some physical processes and compilation of computation. And we can also prove there does not exist an algorithm that recognizes, etc. Here the existence is mathematical, defined inside mathematics, though the object that appears, that is algorithm, can be implemented physically. The set of algorithms is an abstract mathematical set. The next example is mathematical, but in some way boundary, at the frontier of a physical world. Do integers exist? Second order property. Does an integer exist? We speak about something that we cannot define rigorously inside mathematics. Recall the joke of Leopold Kronecker, quoted by Weber. Die ganzen Zahlen hat der liebe Gott gemacht, alles andere ist Menschenwerk. All people understand this German. Okay. However, we have rules that permits to manipulate with integers and to use them in practice, that is in physical world. Though it's not defined object. Abstract notions in mathematics are in a way imaginary. Look at some more consistent example of imaginary existence. Start with Gödel's proof of existence of God, Gödel's ontological proof. Gödel's argument goes back to Anselm of Canterbury. Saint Anselm's ontological argument in its most succinct form is as follows. God by definition is that for which no greater can be conceived. God exists in the understanding. If God exists in the understanding, we could imagine him to be greater by existing in reality. Therefore, God must exist. One can treat this argument as a triviality if must exist refers again to our internal word. If must exist is understood in the way that is common for rank and file believer, it becomes dubious. So let's look at it's interesting Gödel's argument of this proof. It's a sketch, surely it's not a complete proof. So the first axiom says if a possible property phi implies a property psi in each possible world, then psi is positive too. And positive property for each property phi, either phi or its negation must be positive, but not both. Theorem, each positive property is possibly exemplified. That is, applies at least to some object in some world. Definition, an object is godlike if it has all positive properties. Axiom 3, necessary existence of is a positive property. Yes. Theorem, the principal theorem is here, sorry. The theorem, necessarily there exists a godlike object in every possible world. Notice that there is no uniqueness of godlike object. What may be religious or theological significance of this proof is not clear. However, it is of logical and philosophical interest. What does this proof show us to an ordinary believer and how it is related to physical world? The believer wishes to know something physically feasible about God, but does the believer knows what he or she speaks about? First, what is God? Genesis starts with, in the beginning, when God created the universe, the earth was formless and desolate. Thus, God causally preceded the creation of the universe. At least two cases are possible. The modern meaning of the universe and the universe of the Bible does not comprise the whole universe, but only part of it, that is the visible part, visible from the point of view of people of the time when the Bible had been being written about 2,600 years ago. In the case one, God is immaterial. God has no sex. Why we say he? No genes. Then what is the Son of God in Christianism? How man can be godlike if God even has no form? A form demands some geometry, but there was no geometry before the creation of the universe. So case one implies inconsistency even with the rest of Pentateuch, not to speak about apocryphal New Testament. Case two gives a wide space for imagination and speculation, but for a modern human, very likely that for the authors of the Genesis, and it goes back to Sumerians, there was another world where God inhabited. In any case, the texts do not give any definition of God that permits to formulate the question of its existence in the sense of ordinary human understanding of there exists. So there exists means that a person creates an imaginary mythical object that this person calls God. What remains is the state of human spirit, something like in theism. Gödel was a kind of theist, according to some people who knew him. Omnipotent God of passive theism is as laws of nature, except that laws of nature are considered as cognizable, and the God not quite. Man is godlike is an inversion of cause and consequence, well known in psychiatry. Man created God like man. So about how to prove the existence of God remains unclear. Though many people will claim that God exists. Some theologians, if the word is correct, use the Gödel's proof as a proof of the existence of God. But their reasoning is very strange. They, however, do not try to relate this proof with real language that we use. In some way, integer, point, and other mathematical objects are also imaginary. They exist only in our head. But what distinguishes them from mythical objects is that we can relate them to physical algorithms. That is, in what gives another existence. Consider the existence of electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic waves were defined theoretically by James Maxwell by his famous equations in 1955, between 1955 and 1965. By the way, the equations that we see in the books of physics, that equations that were formulated by Heaviside. One can consider the equations and theoretical existence of electromagnetic waves, theoretical. Their physical existence was proved by Heinrich Hertz in 1886, 1889. By the way, Hertz said that the only use of his result is to prove that matter, Maxwell was right. But exactly he lived not so long time. He had some genetic disease, non-curable even now. And in the year of his death, by the way, Oliver Lodge transmitted radio signal for 40 meters in London. This was the beginning of radio. So what the question now is, what is physical there exists? Physical there exists is physically constructive. That is, one can construct a physical algorithm that has specific physically measurable, physically observable properties. Physical algorithm in this context is an implementation of what is called in mathematics a timed reactive system with parallelism. Neither time nor parallelism can be eliminated. In such an implementation, we have physical signals, physical objects, and physical actions. Mathematical data and their processing are also present. The interpretation of results that are finally transformed in mathematical form is based on the underlying theoretical considerations. In experiments of Hertz, there was search for a theoretically defined phenomenon, namely electromagnetic wave. To go from definition to existence is not the only way of proving physical existence. For example, the discovery of electron went through a long sequence of experiments and theorizing and gradually arrived at a definition of a physical object. It was done by very known physicists, Thomson, Townsend, Wilson. And this physical object that was distinguished by long sequence of experiments was electron. So it's identified. So the topic to discuss. Okay, and now I would like to, as a conclusion, I will cite the famous Russian humorist. It's not a single person. For Russians, it's here. For the others, it's less impressive. Do not seek for togetherness in collection, but preferably in the uniformity of separation. Do you understand it? Think it over. It's very wise, especially concerning the existence.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting talk. And well, now it's open for discussion and questions.
Better you discuss, because what can I answer? On the existence of God, nothing.
Can I ask a question? It's Vladek.
Yes.
So thank you very much for a very interesting talk. It kind of reminds me of sometimes I attend seminars on philosophy of physics. What is your opinion? Because physicists always argue, for example, quarks, do they exist or not? On the one hand, you can make experiments just like Rutherford did and bombard the nucleus and the particle, and you can see three what they call partons, which seem to indicate that quarks exist. On the other hand, they have this theory of quark confinement, according to which you cannot separate them, in contrast to nucleus and protons and neutrons. Same thing, like in a simpler case, does there exist, like, for example, the northern pole of a magnet? Because, of course, kind of exists, but we cannot separate it. What's your opinion? I think
whether they exist, but they exist exactly in the sense given by physicists. Yes. So you have some experiment, and by definition of quarks, this experiment is the existence of quarks. They do not need to separate them.
Okay.
It's for the pole.
A question is, does Big Bang exist?
Sure. No, you see, it's not a question. I'm not sure that we can formulate this existed. It's in the past. You say in present, Max. But it
Okay,
wasn't-
did the Big Bang exist?
Yes, did.
There are many difficulties in interpreting the question.
Max, ask Americans about TV series.
Mhm.
You see, it's not we cannot speak here about existence. It's just a hypothesis that may explain some. That's all. This hypothesis or premise, it explains many things.
But the
It's
same
not
goes with
so important where.
the same goes with electrons. I'm not sure at all it's more than mathematical fictions. I'm not sure at all in what sense electrons exist. I'm much more confident in the existence of the natural number, let us say.
But it's not, natural numbers, they do not exist.
Okay, there's another question by Professor Soloviev.
Just a simple question. I also sent the question first. If
Yeah.
you prove with double negation that the end of the world cannot non-exist, how you should interpret it?
Why it's necessary?
So if you prove the end of the world exists, but with double negation, is it the case when you can take off double negation, or you should keep it? It's not constructive.
No, it depends on you.
Oh, it depends maybe on the end of the world.
But for me, it's clear that the end of the world is coming now.
It was some sort of also not very some sort of a model about subjective constructivism, I would say. So you have a round hole and infinity countable number of corridors coming there. So it's a bit exaggerated, but well, I would say not actual infinity, maybe just a limited number. Then there is a constructivist in the center. And the question is, in the end of which corridor the lion waits. It may be not decidable, but if lion is hungry, it will decide very quickly where the constructivist is. So it's sort of subjective difference between existence of two sides. If the solution looks for the author, then maybe the solution will find them and very quickly.